All right. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where everyone's at. Happy Thursday. Hope you guys are all having a great week so far. This is Brady Marr with eCapital. We are going to give it maybe one more minute. It looks like we still have people joining via the WebEx, and then we will get moving. All right. I think we are just a couple minutes past the hour here. So I think let's go and get moving. We are recording this WebEx. That way, if anybody wants to rewatch it and follow up on some of the stuff we cover here, definitely welcome to do so. All right. Well, again, this is Brady Marr. I'm the Planning Analytics Practice Lead for eCapital Advisors. If you guys are anything like me, with everybody working remotely nowadays, it seems like I go from one WebEx to another. So definitely appreciate you taking this hour out of your day to attend our Lunch and Learn. We did a couple of sessions back in, I believe, in August, and we decided we wanted to start continuing to try to do these once a month, maybe, or at least a couple times a quarter, to just share some of the knowledge that we have, regarding planning analytics with some of our clients and just other TM1 planning analytics users out there. Today we've got three main topics we're going to cover. First and foremost, we're going to talk about cash flow forecasting. Second, we're going to dive into a little bit of staffing optimization. And finally, we're going to talk about just different ways that you can improve your TI processing speed. So with me on the phone today are Mitch Dorhout and Kevin Sondry, both on my planning analytics team here at eCapital. All right. Just before we get into it, a little bit about eCapital. I mean, we are an IBM Platinum Business sponsor. We actually started working with, in the FP&A space back in about 2001. So been in business almost 20 plus years, really working with IBM all the way back to the Datum and Cognos planning days. We have three main focuses of our areas of expertise. The piece that I sit in is definitely in the performance management space. Talking about budgeting, planning, financial reporting, financial consolidations. eCapital also offers a great team of people who work in the analytics and data space, as well as in advisory services. So for companies who want to look at doing a roadmap, figuring out helping with a software selection process, things like that, eCapital does offer advisory services in those areas. We have 300 plus clients. Actually, we were talking earlier this morning, it's probably closer to 400 plus now. We continue to add new clients, and again, working in the space for 20 years, and definitely have been working with a lot of these clients for quite a few years. That's one of the things we definitely pride ourselves on, is just the longevity of which our customers stay with us and continue to work with eCapital. All right, so before I get into the webinar today, I did want to just briefly mention, I'm calling it the state of planning analytics, but for those of you who, if you haven't been on LinkedIn or if you haven't seen some of the stuff that the IBM product managers are posting, some big news came out last week. PAL 2.0.57, which is the local install, came out last week. I normally wouldn't mention this if just a normal new release, but it's a major update. And in fact, we're looking internally about trying to do a webinar in the coming weeks to showcase some of these capabilities. But first and foremost, the biggest thing is they've got some awesome new charting and dashboarding capabilities. Really what they're doing behind the scenes, they're really embedding a lot of the Cognos analytics capabilities inside of PAL. So for those of you who have used PAL, it's going to get bigger and better. Guided planning, those of us who are familiar with the contributor process, contributor was a great tool. Many of us love it and still love it, but it was very single dimensional. It's a single dimensional approval process. guided planning is really meant to be much bigger, and that it's company wide. Really meant to encompass all facets of your business. And then finally, they've been talking about this for years, but they finally have embedded what I'm kind of calling it AI forecasting, but it's really just time series forecasting. Pretty cool stuff. Again, I really think it's probably the tip of the iceberg of what type of artificial intelligence IBM is probably working to embed within the Planning Analytics product. Again, if you haven't already, look for it on LinkedIn. Lots of the IBM people have been posting stuff about this new Planning Analytics upgrade, and there's videos out there as well. One main reason why we wanted to do these webinars is something I like to, call our own kind of, marketing pitch, but I like to ask, can your budgeting software do that? Again, we are passionate about TM1 and Planning Analytics here at eCapital. And, the bread and butter of Planning Analytics is definitely budgeting and forecasting. But there are so many more things that Planning Analytics can do within your organization. And we're going to showcase 2 of those today. Saw this on LinkedIn. I just thought it was pretty funny. Reminder for those of you who may not be IBM TM1 Planning Analytics customers. We like to joke that Excel is not a database. TM1 Planning Analytics is a database and can and does a better job than Excel in most cases. All right. All that being said, I am getting ready for topic 1. I'm going to turn this over to Mitch Dorhout. He is a senior consultant on my Planning Analytics team. He is based in Dallas, Texas, and has a great amount of experience with the product and in the industry. He is going to talk about cash flow forecasting. Mitch, I'm going to turn it to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Brady. Thank you for that. So, like I said, my name is Mitch Dorhout. Been at eCapital Advisors for now about 5+ years. Been working mainly in working a lot with budgeting and forecasting of those financial consolidations across a multitude of industries. So, looking forward to demoing to you. I think I'm just waiting. Ryan, if you give me share access, and now I'm
you should have the presenter role now, Mitch. Let me know if you have any troubles.
All right. I think we're going to be okay. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Looks good.
Yep. Awesome. So within cash flow forecasting, so really, IBM Planning Analytics has long been used as a planning and forecasting tool, but we've seen a lot in a couple of different ways, right? So we see it a lot when planning on the P&L side, right? So we might have a revenue planning. We might also, associated with that revenue, there's a cost that's associated with it, so it plans your COGS. So that covers that gross margin side, but then we also want to cover the SG&A, if there's any other things that you need to do, with taxes, interest, all that kind of stuff. We've worked with companies also who, do forecast their balance sheet out, right? So we have people who are, as they're going to be building new, say, for example, building new buildings, right? So we want to be able to plan that, right, and be able to plan our amortization, depreciation, all that kind of stuff. What is the impact going to be to my cash, right? So from a Planning Analytics side, from a cash flow forecasting summary here. So right now, I want to start right now as an HVAC cooling company, HVAC company. So I find this a very interesting industry because as we all are being at home and we are stuck having to work remotely, right, we have to be able to heat our houses in the winter. We have to cool them in the summer, especially being down in Dallas. I experienced Dallas heat for the first time this summer, and it is hot. And if your AC goes out, it's a bad deal. So right now, I'm currently just doing a 2-year forecast. So this is just showing a year, but you can really forecast at different levels, and I'll show you that. But you can forecast for a year. We can forecast down, do a quarterly, a monthly, or a weekly, right? So we want to have that ability to do both. So right now, just from here, we have our base forecast for 2020, which is a mix of a lot of our actuals that have come in, and then we also have a 2021 forecast. We really want to focus on like that 13 to 26 week forecast right now. So right now from an HVAC company, what I can do is, I don't want to just have one version, right? I want to be able to create multiple scenarios. So I can go in and create a new scenario. And the scenario I'm going to do here is we're going to see a big increase in demand. So as we're all being at home, we're going to have increases in maintenance. We're going to have increases in people having to replace their furnaces for the winter coming up. I also want to filter to when I'm in the Southwest. I'm going to filter out to April. So this is getting out, past 26 weeks, right? That, hey, we're going to have an increase in demand because people may have to still be home, right? So companies are making these decisions constantly. So right now, I'm just going to take the source of my forecast version, and I'm going to say increase in demand. And I want this to be a forecast version, so I'm going to click OK here. So right now what it's doing is it's going throughout our entire system, and it's copying the data from that forecast version, and we're copying it to that new version here. So now that just wrapped up, I'm going to go click and refresh. And now you'll notice that we have the increase in demand. So if I simply do a quick calculation here and just say, okay, take the forecast minus this, I'll just say, variance. We can validate, hey, there's been no changes to our, we copied the data, everything looks good. So now I'm going to go to what I talked about earlier. So I'm going to go to the Midwest, right? So we have a good standing point. I'm going to go filter to our sales. So right now, I have some different KPIs from our sales forecasting perspective. So we have some different assumptions for our unit price. What's the installment rate that we have? What's the sales price of what we're selling? Different KPIs. How many units are we selling? The hours, net revenue, etc. So on Midwest here, I can go filter in and say, I'm going to go to gas furnace. And for example, coming up we'll say in November, right? So I'm showing a trend, and right now we're showing a trend that's going upward, right? Now, let's just say for the Midwest company, so starting in November and going out till April, going out to the end of February, I want to highlight here, and I'm going to go data spread, and I'm going to do a percentage change. Actually, instead of a percentage change, I want to do a growth percentage. Actually, I apologize, guys. I'm actually want to do a percentage change. I apologize for that. But I'm going to say it's going to be 115% change. We can apply that. So automatically, we already have increased our revenue simply by highlighting, we just highlighted down to the week level, but we highlighted 3 months. We wanted to increase the amount of units that we're going to be selling by 15%. Let's go to our cash flow, refresh here. We already see a variance in our difference, right? So we have less cash on hand because we have different outflows coming out too. Right, so right away I can be able to filter that. So if I wanted to make adjustments to our unit price, so say that because of our increased demand that's coming, I actually want to increase the price, right? So I'm going to increase it to be $1,600 instead. Our sales price, we can update it to be $2,100. And right away, this is being able to spread to all of our different products that we have here. So right away, being able to make these quick adjustments on the fly. So I apologize, I updated our forecast, but you can say that this was our archived version. We now have more cash on hand, so that we're showing, hey, we have a lot more cash that's coming in. Now, obviously, as we are projecting more cash coming in, right, we have to accommodate for that with our workforce, right? Are we going to have enough to supply for that? Do we need to hire new people? So I can go to our workforce planning side. So I'm filtering our Midwest. And so for this example, we're looking at a lot of our employees, and we're just doing a roster base. We've worked with companies that not only do roster based, they might do, they actually will do position based, right? So I need 5 technicians instead of 3, for example. So for example, I'll just say new hire. It's gonna be an FTE, right? So I can just say full time, and right away, what I'm gonna do instead? I'm gonna add this person in, and instead we're gonna give them a salary of $75,000 a year, right? So we're able to calculate what their adjusted base salary. We have maybe different merit months. So March, we're gonna say, is gonna be the merit month. How much is their increase going to be? Showing what kind of increase in percentage, what's their new base salary, different bonuses we might be giving out, right? So we're giving out, we might have an assumption that says 14%, but we could also build it in a way that, hey, I actually want to adjust it to, say, by person, we'll give them a 3% bonus instead of 14, for example. by simply making those adjustments, right? So we have an adjustment to our outflows, right? So as we increase those workforce, a lot of our outflows is coming out as we bring in these new hires, for example. And lastly, more from a detailed standpoint, right? So we have a lot of our inflows and outflows coming out. So, you know, we have our inflows as basic revenue. We might have things like, we might do some short-term borrowing. I know that some companies we receive like government stimulus, some AR aging, PPE sales, etc. But now I want to take it from a point of view from an outflow standpoint. As your company, you might be preparing to come back into the office, right? So we might be starting to potentially bring some people in. Well, I want to be able to input certain outflows, right? I don't want to have to create a new GL account, etc. So in this example, I already have this type, but I can say, okay, I want to do COVID PPE. So we're adding in this new, and we'll say that from November to December, as we're planning to come in on the first of the year, we're going to say, okay, we're going to spend about $200,000 because we have to get a lot of equipment in our masks. We have to get all those different types of things, right? So I'm going to go in here and I can just do a repeat, and I'll just say, you know, 25,000. Apply it, right? And so as I add that in, we want to understand what's that impact to our cash flow. So that was impacting our 2020. So we saw an impact of $200,000. So right away, we're able to do really quick scenario planning within Planning Analytics, be able to take our different modules that we have set up, right? So we have our sales, our workforce, might have CapEx. So I don't have that shown here, but if we wanted to add in new buildings, or we might be selling some, for example, with COVID. So really, this is just to show you that from a cash flow forecasting standpoint in Planning Analytics, you have a lot of opportunities to be able to understand your business going forward at a deeper level. So that really will wrap up what I have from a cash flow forecasting standpoint. I know it was very brief, but if you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I think we'll have questions at the end as well. So that will conclude it, and I can pass it back on over to Brady.
Thank you, Mitch. Yeah, definitely. If you have questions, you can feel free to type those into the chat or the QA box. I believe that's in your WebEx there. And so with that, Ryan. I need to share my screen now.
There we go, Brady. You should the presenter role.
Thank you. All right. Let's see here. All right, so my topic, again, the piece I'm going to be looking at is workforce planning and really staffing optimization. So we actually did this with a client several years back, even prior to Planning Analytics, and I'm really just going to kind of show, you know, some of the highlights of what we've done there. But the big key here, at least from a staffing optimization standpoint, is the use case I'm going to show you is really more focused on the healthcare industry. You know, trying to, you know, staff your workforce to meet the right level of demand for, you know, by the different disciplines. So your RNs, your LPNs, your PTs, your STs. But really, truly, this can be done across pretty much any different industry. So manufacturing, you know, obviously for different manufacturing lines, different parts of the year, you may need to staff up to hit the demand. Higher education, you know, that focus on the ratio of students and professors by class, by discipline, by college. You know, the distribution centers, you know, I actually used to work for a company that, you know, did a lot of distribution, and, you know, distribution centers, you know, manage their warehouses, you know, based on KPIs such as cents per unit or throughput, and all those are based upon, hey, if we have 2 million units that we have to ship out, you know, what's that staffing need? Normally it costs us 10 cents per unit to ship that product out. So again, all that goes back to the staffing. And again, this is, you know, definitely can be a huge impact, you know, just for some simple math down there at the bottom. You know, if you have a warehouse with, say, 300 employees, you can reduce overtime by just 2 hours per week. So instead of getting 45 hours, you know, instead of your workers billing 45 hours, you know, they're only working 43 hours, you know, based on if you can staff them more efficiently. You know, that's potentially about a $500,000 savings to your company, $500,000. So, definitely, it seems like small impacts, but small impacts across, large organizations, definitely, huge impacts. Finally, some of the stuff we're going to cover here in the demo is really, showing you some of the different levers that you can push within our staffing optimization tool, from overtime to contract labor, to what mix of employees you have, what are your recruitment needs, and what's your anticipated turnover. All those are different levers based on if you think you're going to have higher turnover. Obviously, that means that you're going to need to hire more employees just because to meet those needs. All right. So with that, I am going to get into the demo. All right. So I'm in Planning Analytics Workspace, and we've got a book out here called Staffing Optimization. I have to log in. Apparently, I've been timed out. All right. So again, this is a healthcare company, healthcare specific data, but again, ignore the fact that it's healthcare. Imagine this is your data, again, no matter what industry you're in. The big piece of it here at the top to focus on is, first off, we got this by location. This is not company-wide. This can be location specific. So again, whether or not you have different hospitals, you have different centers, you have different distribution centers, this is specific to an individual location. And we also, you're looking at our projection month of October 2020. Again, the way this was designed is every month you can actually do a new forecast. And in most cases, what that means is, we may copy over the previous month's forecast to the current month. So looking across the top here, the very high level stuff, what this shows me is by discipline, so skilled nursing, physical therapy, occupational therapy. It shows me my demand for these different positions. Just so you know, a positive number basically means that we may be overstaffed in that one area. A negative number probably means that we're understaffed, meaning, specifically in this physical therapy area, we may need to try to make a hire, a couple of FTEs, we may be 2 FTEs short, for our projected numbers right now. And then over here on the far right, this is our quarterly savings. And, really the goal here, these are kind of those 5 levers that I was kind of talking about. Again, contract labor. Can we save money by using less contract labor? I mean, notoriously, contract labor costs more than having an internal employee. Turnover. Again, if you have high turnover, you're going to see that you lose a lot of money. You spend a lot more money because of your turnover. So if you can reduce that turnover, potentially you can have some cost savings there. Can you reduce hiring, and then can you change that skill mix? And again, I'm going to show you kind of briefly through, just kind of walk you through kind of what was built here. Again, what you're seeing here, again, I have this in Paul. This is actually built within Perspectives originally. So it's actually a web sheet that was deployed via TM1 Web originally. All right, so looking across down here in this average monthly projections, what this is our demand. So from a healthcare company, that means these are like your admits. These are the number of visits that, number of patients basically that you're going to have to work through. So very simply, if we came through and we change this from, we think normal, on normal monthly basis, if we look at our 3-month rolling average here, our normal run rate, we're at least for the, for October of 2020, we think, hey, we think we're going to need 177 Medicare admits. So we can definitely change this and say, hey, the modification, we really think it's going to be 190. What you see by that is now we may be even further short, because if the demand increases, we're even further short, at least from a physical therapy standpoint. From a skilled nursing standpoint, it actually looks better because it looked like we were probably previously overstaffed from a skilled nursing standpoint. We have some other things that we can adjust in here, from Medicare episodes per patient. We can adjust the visits per episode based on your different disciplines. Again, right now, I'm not going to mess with those too much, but understand these are just some more levers that we can play with. As we kind of continue going down the page here, the current capacity. So this is your contract labor usage. So historically, we get about 83 visits per month from our skilled nurses. obviously, if we can reduce that contract labor amount, so if we say, hey, let's drop this down to 60, let's try to cover those extra 23 with our own internal people. What you should see here is that now we have a $5,000 savings from contract labor. That's good. I mean, our goal here is, and this is a quarterly savings, obviously we want to maximize our savings. So again, by reducing this from 83 down to 60, basically saying those 23 extra visits per month are going to be covered by instead of by contract labor, by our internal employees, we're looking better now. Again, we can save more money. And obviously, if we continue to reduce that even further down to 40, again, you're going to see this number just continue to go up from a savings standpoint. What our clients really like about this is again, everything is live. You can adjust this. You can play with this. Again, that's really the intent of this is, hey, can I just play with my numbers and see what my numbers start looking like the more I adjust. So again, that was my contract labor usage. As I continue to scroll down here, we get to turnover. Again, turnover is a big deal. You know, some companies have really high turnover. Some companies have really low turnover. But obviously, the more turnover you have, the more you're going to have to rehire people, the more you're going to have to retrain people. Probably it means that your efficiency is going to go down because probably your longer-term employees are probably more efficient in doing their jobs. So at least here, this is our average quarterly FTE turnover. Again, if I came through here and at least on the skilled nursing discipline, if I said instead of 1.63, let's say it's going to jump that up. I'm going to say what happens if we lose 3 people? All of a sudden, we think our turnover is going to increase. Again, that hurts us. You know, this is a cost. So the higher the turnover, we're losing $24,000 per quarter. Again, if I change it now to 1.2, just a slight reduction in our turnover, you know, a slight reduction, surprisingly, based on, you know, how all this math works. I mean, a slight reduction in turnover can actually save you, in this case, $7,000 per quarter at this location. All right, we're going to continue on down into the productivity section. So down here, again, by discipline, by your type of employee. So are they full-time, part-time? We actually show the number of employees that we currently have, and we show their average weekly productivity. Now, behind the scenes, we have all this data where we're pulling in data by person, by location, by month, and by week, actually. And we're calculating, saying our average skilled nurse, full-time skilled nurse can visit about 30 patients per week. So obviously, if I change that up and say, hey, I think they can actually, it's probably a high number. Let's say it's probably more like 28. What you're going to see here is that based on adjusting that number, now all of a sudden, we're not quite as overstaffed as we were because we think that productivity number is probably a little bit high. Same thing on physical therapy. Let's say instead of 32 visits per week, let's say we really think we can get more like 35 visits per week out of our physical therapists. Now, instead of being 2.3 FTEs behind, now we're only 1.4 FTEs behind. So again, you can make up for your numbers up here just by changing, hey, can we get more productivity out of our current employees? And again, by doing that, again, you're going to see some different cost savings over here. And again, we've got some different, nice little charts and graphs, but again, that's, dependent upon your business, you can really embed, almost any type of chart and graph within Planning Analytics. And finally, getting on down here into recruitment, right now, some obviously in different industries, skill mix and the kind of the mix there is a big key. So in this case, if we got a physical therapist and a physical therapy assistant, right now we're anticipating that historically our mix between those is about 59-41. Again, we can change that. We can say, hey, I think we're going to try to increase the number of physical therapists and decrease the number of physical therapist assistants. So maybe, again, we adjust this up to 65. We've built this in behind the scenes so it basically forces this to be 100%. So if you put 65 here, it forces the physical therapy assistants to be 35. Again, based on, these different adjustments that may have some impact based on your staffing needs. But again, that based on your company's decisions, that may be a real scenario where maybe something that internally you want to do is maybe adjust what that skill mix looks like. Again, behind the scenes, we've got all kinds of things, assumptions kind of factored in here. So what is it? What's the cost per visit for an RN? What's the cost per visit for a PT? Obviously, this cost per visit is driving it, a lot of these cost savings. So again, this PT, PTA skill mix, you can actually see by the adjustment that I made here actually is going to cost us money. So actually probably what I want to do here is maybe adjust that the reverse way, change that down from 59 down to 57. I actually get some cost savings there by doing that. It actually makes my numbers up here look better. So now I'm only about 1 FTE short in my physical therapy area. And finally, down at the bottom, the big takeaway from all this, again, this is meant to be a monthly tool. And, I can get down into a recommended hires. So right now, it does look like, based on all the numbers I've entered, all the levers I've pulled, it looks like we need to hire. So the system is recommending making 1 physical therapy full-time hire. Again, based on all that, I've already got that 1 person entered here. So again, that's our projected hires. And I think that's really all I was going to show you. Again, it's just really cool to see, in a 1-page document here, 1-page charts and graphs, and you can adjust 5, 6 different levers. And again, your goal there is obviously not just to save money, but it's also to make sure you have the right staffing to meet your demands. Obviously, if you don't have the right staffing, obviously healthcare is one thing, but if you're in a manufacturing facility, if you don't have the right staffing to make or distribute the products that you need, it's going to be hard to service your customers. All right. And again, if you have questions on that, definitely if you want to hear and see more details of that, we're happy to schedule, some private demos, private conversations to talk through some of that. Otherwise, if you do have some questions, feel free to enter those into our WebEx. And with that, I am going to turn this over to Kevin Sondry. So Kevin is going to talk about some tips and tricks on how to make your data load faster into Planning Analytics. And specifically he's going to be focused, talking about the run TI and run process functions, which are functions that are probably highly underutilized by our clients right now.
Okay, thanks, Brady. I've been with eCapital for a little over 2 years now. I've about 19 years of experience in this space. Had 5+ years at IBM, and I've worked with a lot of different clients across many different industries. So today we're going to talk about TI processes, and the first thing to consider are your data source considerations. And so when you create a new TI process, the first tab where you select your data source, there are 5 different data source options. I'm going to, for purposes of this presentation, I'm just going to deal with the 3 most commonly used, which are ODBC, text file, and loading from one cube to another. So ODBC obviously is an external data source, for example, Oracle, SAP, or SQL, and you're using a query to extract data to load into a Planning Analytics cube. Obviously, the advantage here is that you're pulling the data directly from the source, so you've got the latest and greatest data. The disadvantage is the load times can vary depending on the nature of the query and or the proximity of the data server to the TM1 server, and I'll give you an example of that in a minute. And then text file, a tab delimited or comma delimited file. Biggest advantage of using text file is since the file is static, there's no recalculation on every record, and so therefore the data loads faster. The disadvantages are if the file is not placed in the correct location, the process is going to fail, or if somebody changed the file formatting from when you originally created the TI process, then you're either going to get a bunch of errors or it's just going to fail outright. And then the third option from a data source consideration is loading from one Planning Analytics cube to another. So when you're using an ODBC data source, there are some options that you can use to make it go faster. The first is to use views. So if possible, extract the data from a view rather than a table or multiple tables. that contain a series of joins. The query runs faster. Since the views are static, there is no need for the query to execute for every record. Secondly, determine the proximity of the TM1 server to the database server. So when they're not in the same location, then you've got all those data hops that need to happen, and that can seriously degrade the performance of your data load. An example that I ran into, so we had a client and they had a very complex query. As a matter of fact, I copied and pasted the query into a Word document. It was 3 pages long. It was a whole series of inner joins, outer joins, all these different tables. And I had asked them at the time, I said, well, can we get a view? And at this client, the lead time to get a view created was 9 months. So we decided to proceed ahead. And so we created everything in Dev. We ran it, and the process took about 4 hours to load. And the client says, yeah, that's fine, because we'll just run it on the weekend. Okay, so we moved we moved everything. We migrated it to production, and I set it to run on a Saturday. When I came in on Monday morning, it was still running. And I think it finished about 2 o'clock on Monday afternoon. And so when we tried to troubleshoot why, it turned out that in Dev, the TM1 server and the database server were both located in Virginia. And the production TM1 server was located in Hartford. So for every record, it's going back and forth across that network. And that was what was taking so long. What we did was we had them essentially export the data from the database to a file, and then we imported the file, and we were able to get the processing times down to a more manageable level. So again, using a file, extracting the data source to a file and then importing the file, you can significantly reduce processing times. So now when you're moving data from cube to cube, depending upon the nature of the 2 cubes, the amount of rules and feeders involved, the amount of data involved, there are some tips that you can use to reduce the time to process. First being, create the source view in the prologue. So define the specific slice of the cube you need to access for your data load, so you're not accessing more than you need to. For larger views, use the view construct function in TM1. So the view construct function is, you do a view construct of the cube name and the view name. And what it does is it constructs, pre-calculates, and stores a Stargate view in memory on the server. So as it's running record to record, it's not having to recalculate to make sure the data hasn't changed. Next, it's always good practice to turn off cube logging. So basically in the prologue, you turn it off, and then in the epilogue, you turn it back on. And I've included a couple lines of code here that you can do to do that. And then finally, another option is to split the load into 2 processes. And that's where you export the source cube data to a flat file and then import the data file into the target cube. And I've seen many instances where that can reduce by more than half the amount of time it takes for the data load to occur. So then, what are some other options? So in TM1 9.5, Run TI was introduced. And essentially what Run TI is a command line interface tool that can initiate a TM1 process. So one thing to remember about TI processes is that even though the concept of multi-threaded query exists in TM1, TI processes run single-threaded. So in other words, it's running on a single core. So it doesn't matter how many cores you have on your server, that's running on a single core. So with Run TI, what it did was it gave us the ability to essentially utilize multiple cores by executing multiple processes simultaneously. And what run TI does is it looks to see if a core is busy. If it isn't, it goes to the next available core. So this enables splitting up long-running processes into pieces that run simultaneously, taking advantage of all the cores on the server. And I'll give you an example in a minute. So then in Planning Analytics 2.0, IBM introduced run process. So I think most of you are familiar with the execute process, where you can execute a TI process from within another process. Run process is similar to the execute process function, with the exception that when it is executed, it will run the process on the next available core. So like run TI, this enables splitting up long-running processes into pieces that run simultaneously, taking advantage of all the cores on the server. And the syntax is exactly the same as execute process. So I was talking about an example before. We were working with a client that had a very complex calculation cube. It was calculating wholesale loan portfolio losses and across a number of different scenarios. And the calculation cube was so large that you couldn't open it at anything more than a leaf level. So what we did was we created a mirror cube that didn't have any rules. And then, so we were going to move the data from the calculation cube to the mirror cube so that we could do reporting off of that cube without any rules in it. And so originally we tried to do a cube-to-cube TI process. That didn't work. So then we created a process which exported it out to a file, and then a second process which imported into the reporting cube. Just to give you an idea of how much data we were talking about, the text file that was created when we exported the data out to a file was 42 gigs. And the process, so the two processes took 13.5 hours to run. So the client was like, well, this isn't going to work because we need to be able to run multiple scenarios. We need to be able to make changes and see what the impact is going to be. So at the time, it was TM1 9.5 and Run TI had just been introduced. So we came up with a methodology of splitting it up. And here's a cube that I created. So in their particular environment, they had 12 cores. So I created an index dimension for each of those 12 cores. And we did a view construct process to construct the view, again, to put it all into memory so it would run quicker. And then we had the process that was run, and then the two parameters. So there were 4 different scenarios that they were running. And so we had the 4 scenarios, and then what I did was I split the periods into 3 different, so 4 times 3 being 12. And so then we could use this cube as a data source and just run through that and have the Run TI execute. We went from 13.5 hours to 1.5 hours. And there had been talk at the time of increasing up to 20 cores. And if we had done that, I think we could have gotten the time probably down into, somewhere in the 30 to 40 minute range. So again, it's an excellent way of using the technology to improve the performance speed. So other considerations to improve processing times. One is to minimize error generation, right? So one of the things we want to make sure is to update all metadata prior to loading data, right? Because if you're loading data and all of a sudden there's an account that doesn't exist, that's going to generate errors. Or if there's a cost center that doesn't, a new cost center that's been added and it hasn't been updated in TM1, that's going to generate errors. Secondly, ensure that the data is loading to the leaf level, right? Because you can't load data to a consolidated level. So just make sure your cell put ends are at a leaf level. And then ensure that data is loading to cells that are not rule-based. And you can use the cell is updatable function to do that. Next, optimize the rules and feeders on source and target cubes, right? Data changes causes feeders to refire, adding processing time to your processes. And then, spoiler alert, a future lunch and learn session will have some tips and tricks for optimizing rules and feeders. And then finally, minimize external data calls in the data process. You know, cell get ends and ATTR statements. Obviously, you can't avoid them entirely, but if they can be minimized, they can reduce the amount of time in processing. So with that, I think I am done. I'm going to turn it back over to Brady.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. And really, as far as questions go, I mean, if there are any questions, I did see one question in the chat. I think Mitch took one, and I have one privately in the chat. But someone asked me about building the staffing model and with web sheets versus, you know, pushing it into Paul. And I will tell you, obviously, when we built the one that I showed off originally, again, Paul did not exist. Obviously, with Workspace being there now, and there's a lot more capabilities there, you know, it really kind of comes down to whichever really method you prefer. A lot of companies are still so Excel based, and rightfully so. Excel is a great tool, and hey, I want to be able to export it out to Excel. I want to be able to print it for a report book, and I want it to look exactly the way I want it to. I'll tell you, at that point, Excel probably makes a lot of sense to kind of keep it there. Some of the new, maybe a little bit of a spoiler alert, like what Kevin was just saying. Some of the new features within Workspace actually allow us to, you know, create a dashboard that fits to one page. So it's an 8.5 by 11 page, you know, portrait or landscape. You can actually make all those selections, whereas previously you could not. So I'll tell you, I think with a lot of the options coming out in Paul now, it really truly does get back to your preference. I mean, maintaining something in Paul versus maintaining something, you know, in Excel, it really is probably about 50-50. You know, both have their advantages.
I think once you get into working with Planning Analytics Workspace, though, and you start looking at that functionality, I think people want to use it more and more.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've had a lot of experiences where, you know, even from I'll take a financial consolidations process. I use, instead of, you know, having to use Contributor where you set up like a monthly workflow, I basically use PAW to be able to bring in different reports and explorations where they can be able to say, okay, I loaded in my data. Okay, validated the trial balance is good. Okay, do I have any missing mappings? Update those. Validate my P&L balance sheet, and then push it on over to Consolidated, where now it's a very easy process where you're not dependent on one administrator. Your entities can take that on, and really that could apply to any parts of your business. Really, you could have your sales team, your workforce team. Anyone can really load the data that they need to. So it's not just on one administrator or two administrators. You really can push this out to the entire company.
All right. I am looking in the chat and the QA. I don't see any additional questions. So if there are not any questions, we can give everybody back a few minutes of the day. But we definitely appreciate everybody attending this. Again, we had good feedback last time, and again, it's something we want to continue to do. It's again, we're passionate about the TM1 Planning Analytics platform. Definitely want to see it and see IBM continue to invest, continue to grow, and again, it's exciting to see all the new stuff coming out, and you know, it really is exciting to see what, you know, all the different things our customers and clients are doing with the tool. It's every day I continue to be amazed. It's like, oh, somebody came up with a new idea of something that could be done inside of TM1 and Planning Analytics. So it's an exciting time.
Awesome.
Great.
Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it a lot. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.